like to welcome everybody to this second day of the Science Business Research Road to Net Zero Industry Conference, and particularly to the people who've agreed to join us here on the panel, as well as to the people in the room and the people online. So we're joined today by Rosalinde van der Vlies, who is with the European Commission, DG RTD, Director in the Clean Planet team, to Riccardo Procacci, who is CEO of Avio Aero and Vice President of GE Aerospace, to Damien Meadows, who is a legal and political advisor on DG CLIMA with extensive experience in the emissions trading system, and to Michael May, head of the business unit Aviation at Germany's Fraunhofer Institute. So I'll be your moderator at this session. I'm not an aviation expert. I'm a senior advisor at Science Business, a journalist and occasional consultant. I did briefly work in the aviation sector, but again, I'm not an expert. So I'd like to frame the discussion by just sharing a couple of headlines, so why we're discussing aviation at this conference, why we thought it was important. Above all, the transport sector as a whole accounts for about 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the EU. Of that, 3/4 is road transport, and shipping and aviation, mostly shipping, together account for about 10% of EU emissions. So CO2 emissions from aviation took a nosedive during the pandemic for reasons that we all know well, but they are already bounced back, and we expect them to grow significantly in the coming years. So even if it's currently only, quote unquote, 2.5% or so of global CO2 emissions and only 3% of EU emissions, aviation is a target. It also has significant environmental impact unrelated to CO2 emissions, if you think of aircraft noise and contrails, which I suspect somebody might mention in the discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Riccardo Procacci to open the discussion by telling us what he can do, or what we can do about all that. He is, as I said, CEO of Avio Aero, part of GE Aerospace, Vice President and CEO of GE Additive. He's been a sales manager, a country manager, and a product manager, and led the integration of Avio Aero, an Italian company, into GE. He's also responsible for units making propellers and gas turbine engine components and systems. And most importantly, he's a mechanical engineer, which means he's grounded in reality. So with that, over to you, Riccardo.
Yeah, as you can understand, I'm not exactly young. I've been around for a while. Thank you, Brandon, for your nice introduction. And good morning, and thank you for joining us today to discuss this very important topic about the role of flight in a more sustainable world. When it comes to climate change, sustainability, and protection of our future, I think we can all agree that we are at a pivotal moment of our history. I think we can also agree that the aviation industry will play a crucial role in that future, even more if you consider the growth forecast in air traffic demand around the world. Now, commenting on your introduction, it is true that today the emissions coming from the aviation sector are less than what other sectors do. But the growth rate that we expect for the future will change the game. So it is important that we act now before it is too late. We are facing such challenges with one strong belief. Reducing CO2 emission is a must, but the status quo won't do. It needs all of us to play a role, a different role. And while disruptive technologies that revolutionize aircraft and engines are needed to reach our net zero ambitions, no one entity or even aviation segment can achieve net zero on its own. No one country can do either, not even one continent. This requires a global solution and global participation, and Europe must obviously play its part. For example, incentives that foster infrastructure to make alternative fuels more widely available and affordable are just as important as making new aircraft and engines with improved fuel burn. In fact, a combination of three key measures could achieve substantial CO2 emissions reductions. First one is the use of aviation fuel of SAF. Second, improvement in air traffic management and in aircraft operations. And third, and finally, new aircraft and engines technologies such the open fan engines, hydrogen-powered engines, and hybrid electric aircrafts. However, to enable these measures to be successful, there are many actions that need to be planned and carried out. We need a continuous support from policymakers to the development of novel technology and their application. We need to stimulate the ramp-up of SAF and green hydrogen production capacity. We need a global and consistent approach to regulation and certification standards. We need continued collaboration between research institutions and aerospace suppliers in the development of new technologies. And we need large investment in the infrastructure required to support new aviation technologies and fuels. At GE Aerospace and at Avio Aero, we are doing our part, having spent nearly $2 billion in 2022 on aviation research and development. We have unveiled our most comprehensive technology roadmap in the history of our company. We are developing innovative technologies for the next generation of revolutionary propulsion systems. We do so thanks to the seamless R&D investment and well-established R&D network of collaboration with major European universities and international research centers. As part of GE Aerospace, we are also committed to the global aviation industry goal of net zero CO2 emission by 2050. In fact, Avio Aero contribution is crucial in defining the future of flight, leading programs related to hybrid electric architecture and hydrogen propulsion. The fact that the EU has programs in place like Clean Aviation and the presence of partners like Airbus enable that a critical part of this development is carried out here in Europe. As such, we contribute substantially to the growth of the European aviation industry. We look at this technology in a comprehensive fashion, demonstrated by our commitment to clean aviation projects like Amber, IDEA, and Ophelia. In Amber program that we coordinate, we plan to mature, integrate, and validate key technologies necessary for a megawatt-class hybrid electric propulsion system powered by hydrogen fuel cells and integrating hybrid electric components. Hydrogen is core also to the IDEA program, another project that we coordinate for the direct burn of hydrogen as an alternative to Jet A, and we'll do this in collaboration with Airbus. And finally, as part of Ophelia, we are partnering to develop with within the consortium CFMI between GE Aerospace and Safran of France, we are partnering to develop a new open fan engine architecture. And as I said, moreover, many of these investments are directed through CFMI International, the successful long-term 50-50 joint venture between GE and Safran. So, in conclusion, our commitment is clear to see, but it will take all of us to achieve the industry goal to be net zero by 2050. Thank you for your continued support, and look forward for a constructive and interesting conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Riccardo. So I'll throw out a first couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to make it as interactive as possible. So since we're at a conference of science business and people here are very interested in research, we'd love to hear what the Commission, and particularly DG Research, is doing to help the public-private partnership that he mentioned. So what types of programs are available to help get this technology, these technologies up and running?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. We have also a select company physically with us, which is really wonderful to see you. Before I dive into what the Commission is doing in research innovation, I would like to start by taking a step back and refer to the State of the Union that our President delivered earlier this week, last week, and I think it's really very, very encouraging to see, because there you can really see the commitment of the European Commission to supporting European industries, to also supporting the dialogues. And I think this is really the way forward, because as Riccardo said, I mean, there's not one silver bullet, and there's also not one single actor that can basically deliver net zero solutions alone. We really need to collaborate, and it is in that spirit that the European Commission is really very, very supportive for also helping the European aviation industry to deliver and show a leadership role on how we can deliver these net zero solutions. So from the research and innovation perspective, I guess you're all familiar with Horizon Europe. Putting Horizon Europe in the bigger context, we are really proud of Horizon Europe because this is the biggest publicly funded program for research and innovation in the world. And of course, we are also very, very happy that as part of this program, we are partnering with the industry. Riccardo already mentioned clean aviation, and this is really one of the biggest investments that we are making in partnership. The Commission is investing 1.7 billion euros in this partnership, and that also shows the importance of this partnership for the Commission. And there, it is for us very, very important that together with the industry, we develop a common strategic research and innovation agenda. Because we are all aware, time is short, we need to deliver. So at this moment in time, we cannot afford to invest in the wrong solutions. So this common strategic research innovation agenda that we have been developing in the context of the Clean Aviation Partnership is really, setting the direction between the Commission as policymaker, the industry, but also the academia to really see, okay, which solutions do we want to invest in for the future? And we have now come at a moment that we are actually reviewing our strategic research innovation agenda. And there I would also like to encourage all stakeholders to get involved in this review to see whether we are on track, whether the direction that we have chosen is still the right one, whether we need to make a few adjustments, because I do think that we need to define a common strategic agenda. Now, linked to this common strategic agenda, I think is also extremely important to align our European strategic agenda with those of the member states. And as part of the partnerships, we have state representative groups where member state representatives are present. And we can use these state representative groups to align also our agendas with what's happening at national level. And there are already a few examples where, for instance, certain topics for technologies we have at the EU level not made the investment because we know that other countries are investing in these solutions. So you can see a much closer collaboration between the research and innovation activities that are taking place at national level and the ones that we are doing at the European level. Now, apart from the partnership with industry, we also have the European Research Council that is investing in basic research, including on aviation topics. We also have the European Innovation Council that is supporting disruptive innovations with startups. And also these instruments can be very relevant for the aviation sector. And then, of course, we have our Cluster 5 where we Horizon Europe, where we foster collaborative research on aviation, and we really try to be complementary. Because I'm very convinced that we will be delivering the technology that will be necessary to enable the net zero aviation. However, we also need to make sure that the whole ecosystem around it supports this. This means we need the right infrastructure at the airports. We need the SAF to be available. We need the hydrogen to be available. And for all this, the Commission is supporting the Alliance on Zero Emission Aviation that is looking at all the framework conditions that will be necessary in order to make sure that we do not only have the solutions, but that we can also use the solutions, so deploy them and scaling them up. And linked to that, of course, it's also very important that the laws that we have in Europe are also supporting these developments, but I'm sure Damien will talk a bit more about that later. But my key message here is that we need to continue to have a common vision, a common European vision, not only between the Commission and the industry in our partnership, but also more broadly, including with member states and regions, and that we are very committed from the Commission side to support the technological solutions that are under development, also through other means, including regulatory infrastructure and future incentives to also produce in Europe the necessary fuels and technologies to make this work. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And that was an excellent segue to Damien, because I know he's got some thoughts on the infrastructure and the ecosystem around aviation. So if you've got wonderful new planes flying in the sky, you still need to fuel them on the ground. And can you tell us what the Commission is doing on that front?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Riccardo and Rosalinde. I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I think I would really just have three main points to add. Riccardo emphasized the importance of alternative fuels, SAF, and in 4 months' time, the European laws, the EU ETS, is offering 2 billion euros to cover the cost difference for deployment of these fuels at any airport in Europe, and covering up to 100% of the cost difference from kerosene at, I think, over 300 airports in Europe. So engineers are amazing. I mean, we need this, scientists, we need all this, but we also need the economics to work and the regulatory structure in place to encourage deployment of solutions. I think in 2021, about 300 tons of biofuel were used in Europe. And with this 2 billion euros coming on top of a 300 euro per ton price incentive for alternative fuel from the ETS on a first-come, first-served basis, it's had astonishingly little publicity, but I think it's far more exciting than anything in the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of getting airlines to go out there, make contracts and use the fuel. We hear worries from some airlines that the money won't be enough. Our reaction is, great. I mean, use up that support, deploy SAF at scale. The second point, because aviation is, despite best efforts, hard to decarbonize, is to emphasize the attention that's recently been coming on the overall climate impacts of aviation. And it's amazing the headlines I've seen over the summer. I think maybe falsely giving the credit to the United States for progress here, because the European Parliament's been trying to have work here for 15 years. We know the total impact of aviation is 2 to 4 times the CO2 alone, and it looks like there are cost-effective ways to reduce these impacts, whether it's Maastricht and the airspace routing they've had for contrail avoidance, or through the improvement of fuel quality, reduction of naphthalene. I mean, these are solutions, and they're low-hanging fruit, and we desperately need to pick this low-hanging fruit. And I'm delighted to say that on Friday last week, the Commission revised the ETS's Innovation Fund and made the reduction of these climate impacts eligible for funding. So anybody who can reduce aviation's non-CO2 climate impacts, because it does have a fuel cost to route your plane to reduce contrails. These, I think from the next call in November, the legal framework has been changed to allow support. And if you can reduce these cheaply, that gives a strong profit incentive. I think the third point here I wanted to mention was Horizon Europe, again, is world leading. We have funded through the ETS system a 40 billion euro fund that's separate to that, the ETS Innovation Fund. And it supported, I think, Rome Airport, it supported a few biofuel plants in Sweden and elsewhere, but the bulk of what it's spending is upstream. We're doing an 800 million euro auction for green hydrogen starting in November. There's literally billions of euros being spent from this on deployment of wind farms, of upstream technologies, development of hydrogen, which of course may end up just being used by aviation, but it will bring them down the cost curve because the transition is necessary, but it's not necessarily going to be cheap. I'll probably stop there because I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah. So I'll just throw out the last question to Michael. So Fraunhofer is one of the biggest research groups in Germany. And you said that you've got 35 different groups working on different aspects of sustainable aviation. So I'd love to hear what you think are the most promising technologies and what you need from policymakers as well to make things happen.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thanks for the question. Well, to be honest, as an aerospace engineer, I think and I'm an aerospace engineer by heart, I'm living in exciting times. Over the last decades, aviation industry has made significant progress, but gradual progress, like improving efficiency by 2% per year, which is really good. But now we're at the moment in time where we are introducing new technologies. So we've heard about SAF, we've heard about hydrogen, we've heard about fully electric or hybrid electric. And when you're at this moment in time, you can think about new leaps. You can think about new, maybe even new types of aircraft design. For example, if you're introducing hydrogen, hydrogen requires significantly more volume than kerosene. So you have to rethink the structure. So things have to be bigger. Suddenly, maybe you're not storing the fuel inside the wings anymore. So you have dry wings, so you need new concepts for that. You can make use of that. And I think this is where research organizations can come in and have their play, and also try to bring the excellent research which is done at the university level to higher TRLs so that actually the industry can make use of them. And well, some of the examples that we're working on is, for example, if you're thinking about going for a hybrid electric, you need to think about a new architecture, electrical architecture of the aircraft. So this is one of the aspects where we're putting a lot of work into. Another aspect when you're thinking, and Sylvester Pino mentioned it yesterday, when you're thinking about introducing composites at large scale in aircraft and you're lacking concepts for recycling, and you don't have anyone who can use your recycled product later, you're in trouble. So one way on how recycling can be made more available is, for example, by introducing thermoplastic composites, which also reduces the weight in structures because you can start using welding or something like this and get rid of riveting. And coming back to Horizon programs, before the Clean Aviation, we had the Clean Sky 2. And one of the big demonstrators which is being produced within Clean Sky 2 is the so-called multifunctional fuselage demonstrator, which is an 8-meter barrel made from thermoplastic composites. And different players all across Europe have contributed to that. And now we're in this moment in time where there's an upper shell and a lower shell which have been delivered to our facilities in Stade, and we're the ones who are welding it together now, and hopefully it all works. The last one is the one who's in trouble if it doesn't work. But so I think this is a really good example on how European research has come together and offered benefit by working together. And finally, I would say, if it comes to infrastructure, not talking about the ground-based infrastructure for refueling, which is really important, but also if you're thinking that one day you want to certify your new products, maybe, well, if you're going from Jet A to SAF, the test stands will be very similar. I don't think you need big modifications. However, if you want to test a hydrogen-powered engine, whatever, I think you need new infrastructure. And I think this is where research organizations can jump in and build up this infrastructure and then provide them discrimination-free to all of the industries and not just to one particular company.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw it open to questions from the floor in just a moment. Before I do, though, I wanted to pick up on one thing that Rosalinde said, which is you talked about a European vision, and we've heard a lot about European subsidies and European initiatives. I'd like to ask Riccardo whether, even as a European, as part of a US company, whether you see any issues with an overly European focus on things.
I was discussing with someone in the audience before that the very existence of programs like Clean Sky first, 1, 2, and then Clean Aviation has made has had a substantial positive influence on how my company is evolving as part of the GE Aerospace conglomerate. Today, because of the very existence of Clean Sky first and Clean Aviation after, we have been able to bring to Europe essential parts, substantial parts of the developments of this new technology that otherwise would have normally happened in the US. And that has, as a consequence, one, we have a direct say, as Europeans, we have a direct say in in making true our ambition for a clean aviation. Second, give or take, we doubled the number of in the last 10 years, the double number of engineers that we employ across Europe, Italy, Poland, Czech Republic, and third, it is ultimately the kind of the jobs that they will be creating here, because once you develop the technology, you're also very likely gonna be part of the production, the implementation of the project. So the existence of these programs is only good for Europe, for our company, and for the implementation of our vision of a clean aviation.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody from the floor already have some questions ready? I see one hand. Is there another? We've got another roving microphone. We'll come to you. Please do introduce yourself as well.
My name from DG Research and Innovation. I have some past
Is it on?
with aviation research. My question is that what about international cooperation? Because we 30% are European flights, but 70% are Asia Pacific, North America, and so on. I think we do quite a great job nowadays in Europe, but do we have cooperation also with international partners?
Is that a question to somebody specific or anybody who wants to answer? So who'd like to take that?
I can talk about the cooperation, the cooperation in research and development. That is exactly what I've been talking about. So as far as other aspects, I'm not. I don't think I can comment really.
Well, take a first stab on R&D then, if there's something new to say that you haven't already said.
Again, R&D is, as I say, is a global effort. There are key technologies where is gears, where is hydrogen combustions, where is low pressure turbines that are being developed here. There are key technologies on how we use hybrid to improve, as we would do in a car, how to improve the efficiency of an engine that are currently developed in the US. Even certain technologies that are where we are looking at the use of additive manufacturing to produce certain parts that will enable higher and more efficient configurations that we are working on in Germany. So for us, and that's a little bit in the nature of our multinational company, the effort is global in its nature. Then, as far as Riccardo I'm concerned, being a proud European citizen, I do everything I can to make sure that Europe, Italy, Poland, Czech Republic, Germany have the most impact and then the biggest part in this effort. But the effort is global in nature for us.
Anybody else like to add to that?
Yeah, maybe if I can add here, I mean, obviously we are here speaking of a global market, but it's very important for the European Union to demonstrate technological leadership. And I think we have a very ambitious European industry, very committed. And linked to that, I would like to pick up on a small point that was made. I do think that we have very, very interesting and important technological developments, but also, as Damien mentioned, also we made some very important investments, for example, through the Innovation Fund. And I do think that all of us, we can do more to talk about this, to spread these messages, to our European citizens as well. Because I do think that we have very good stories to tell, both in terms of technological progress and technological leadership that we are demonstrating inside the European Union, and also in terms of investments that we are making. So this basically, I take the opportunity to also, invite also the audience in the room. Let's talk a bit more. Let's not be shy about, the milestones that we are achieving on our pathway towards climate neutrality. Now, going back to the collaboration, I also think, but maybe Damien, you can say more about that, that we are also ensuring a level playing field, for instance, through the CBAM. And I think that's also very important because it goes hand in hand with the European technological leadership, that we also make sure that we have a level playing field on the ground there.
Yeah, if anybody doesn't know what CBAM stands for, it's the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And I actually wanted to go to Damien to talk about what you think might need to be done with flights coming into and out of Europe and not just flights within Europe.
Sure. I mean, just to follow on from what Rosalinde said and the question on working with the rest of the world, this is crucial on climate. We can't get there without China, without India, without the US acting. And I think one of the things we're very proud of is that China has created an emissions trading system covering 4.5 billion tons. And they have called us their teachers in this. I mean, what we've got right, what we've got wrong, they've learned from. And that's good for Europe. I mean, China needs to put a price on carbon. Others need to do this. When it comes to the innovation fund, though, that is limited for spending within Europe. I mean, this goes through the European political system. We need these developments here. We're up in much bigger issues there. And that brings, I think, yeah, Brendan, to the issue. I mean, everything I've spoken about relates only to flights within Europe. Aviation is bouncing back, flights are up. The EU carbon price isn't punitive. I think I saw on social media, are we killing the aviation industry? I think climate action has never been intended to kill the aviation industry. It's just there have to be fair contributions across the economy. The Parliament was so happy, I think, to get this agreement to tackle non-CO2 emissions from aviation that I think for everyone in the room when this law was agreed, we couldn't believe that the Parliament had accepted that long-haul flights were exempted for the third time from contributing to climate action. So Europe's implemented ICAO's CORSIA scheme in European law. We've been a big supporter of this for flights outside of Europe. We haven't seen the US implement any laws, and we haven't seen China change its position from saying that it's unfair. So Europe wants this to work. If it doesn't work, it's not Europe's fault. And the Parliament is basically instructing us to address long-haul flights in a few years' time, unless this CORSIA scheme has been improved. I think when that comes, if that comes, that could generate a huge amount of support for SAF, a huge amount of support for innovation and deployment. I mean, I'm looking at the law we've got just for inside European flights and what it's doing, and imagining, I guess, daydreaming what it could do if it applied more broadly. But we're not at that point yet. If CORSIA and ICAO is able to deliver, fantastic. It's just that's out of Europe's hands. We can't oblige China to do this. We can't pass legislation in the US Senate.
Thanks very much. Would you like to add something?
Yes, I would also like to answer this question. And I fully agree with the other panelists that it is a global effort, so we have to find ways of working together. And I firmly believe that as long as we're still at the research level, which is pre-competitive, this is possible. And also because we're, say, in the Clean Sky or Clean Aviation programs, we're using public money. We are encouraged to actually publish these results. And over the past couple of years, there's big conferences in the US, and Clean Sky or Clean Aviation have always had their own panels there telling the US what has been done in Europe at a very high level. But I think it's very good to have this exchange, and there have also been technical sessions. And I think as long as you're exchanging information at that level, I think we can all profit from that.
Thanks. Does anybody from the floor have another question? Oh, we see lots of hands now. That's great, makes my job easy. I'm not sure who held their hand up first.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aida Ranz from the Spanish National Research Council. It would be great if you could share your point of view on two aspects that maybe we haven't mentioned. One is skills, that was mentioned yesterday during the discussions we had. Because we have talked about really challenging deployment, lots of things. Do you think we are prepared to have enough workforce, a skilled workforce to cover that? Or are you planning also something to collaborate in that sense to foster that. And the other aspect is, it was mentioned a bit also this broader perspective and also the research centers. We are talking a lot about innovation, but how are you ensuring that lower TRLs like basic research and also creativity, that it was also mentioned yesterday, how you connect that with what you are doing, because it's also basic research cannot be done somewhere apart, isolated. If it's not connected, we are going to lose we are research performers. So, and not only a specific air research performer, but the people working on hydrogen, on cybersecurity, on quantum, if they don't have this access to be able to play creativity in your sector, you will lose that connection, and that's really difficult to build. So how are your views on that sense also?
So who'd like to start? Thank you for the questions.
Yeah, I can maybe start, and in particular with the last point, which is a very important one, absolutely. What we basically do through Horizon Europe is that we cover the entire TRL range. In the Clean Aviation Partnership, we focus the activities on disruptive innovations, but we link back to the lower TRL projects that we are funding through other parts of Horizon Europe, so the European Research Council, Cluster 5 in particular, and that way it is extremely important, as you say, to connect the dots, because we basically want to make sure that we have a research that then also can then serve also the needs of the industry. We also had recently another call for expression of interest in order to enlarge the membership of the Clean Aviation Partnership, where we had quite an overwhelming response, in particular also new universities and small and medium-sized enterprises. But it's very important for us to make sure that whatever we do in other parts of Horizon Europe, we do it also in synergy with what we are doing in the Clean Aviation Partnership. And there, again, the collaboration and the dialogue is extremely important to make sure that we break away from a siloed approach, but that we really make sure that we are having the full overview and contributing all together to the ultimate strategic goals, and that is to become net zero by 2050. Now, on the skills, of course, as you know, this is also very high on our political agenda, the Year of Skills, the Net Zero Industry Act, where the Commission also proposed to set up various academies. In the hydrogen field, we will be launching next year a hydrogen academy in order to make sure that we then can build the skills for the hydrogen economy there. For the moment, there are no similar plans under the Clean Aviation Partnership, because this is actually what we are doing together with the partnership. But I do think that there are various private initiatives in the aviation sector looking at the skills agenda. But from the Commission side, there is absolutely a willingness to collaborate and also to support the different skills initiatives that do exist in the different member states and in different companies, to bring this together, to make sure that we basically build the skills agenda through a European research area, and to connect also the different initiatives that are already happening in different companies in different member states.
Yeah, I can echo what Rosalinde just said. There is money available in the universities for lower TRL. The challenge we see often as an industry is that this money is utilized, I would say, spotty, without a lot of coordination. And therefore, the impact of all the money is limited. So already probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, in Avio, we have decided that we to create what we call a network of research institutions where we set our ambitious goals for research, and then we invite different departments of different universities that, I don't know what happens in other parts of the world, but in Italy often happen to fight each other, not to compete, not necessarily in a productive way, to cooperate so that they lamp up their efforts to achieve a more impactful results aligned with what we need. And this is having a great impact on the quicker maturation of technologies. As far as the topic of skills, we see that when we as an industry, we make our effort to engage universities to talk about what kind of skills we need in the future, when we engage and put our own effort in suggesting how to create new graduation courses, that aligned with what we need. We not always, but we often find universities they're very keen to work with us. Already a few years back, we created with 3 different universities in Italy specialization courses with about on the topic of additive manufacturing. Was a topic where we were growing a lot. We couldn't find the necessary skills. We've been able to engage, and universities, not all, because certain find all the reasons not to cooperate, but others are really open. Polytechnic of Torino, for example, not only that. We have a great engagement, and matter of fact, this flexibility in creating the necessary skills is one of the levers I play the most with my board of directors to say in the US, to say this is the place where you wanna invest, because we have the capability to access to the right resources, and we have the necessary flexibility to engage university to create the resources we need. So I see it more as an opportunity and a possible point of strength than anything else.
Do you like to add something, or we?
Yes, yeah, sure. Well, one point I first wanted to make is about this basic research. So aside from the European programs, we also have the national programs. And for example, if I look into my home country, Germany, I see that we have the so-called LUFO program. And within this LUFO program, there's one pillar which is dedicated only to university research. And this is on all sort of green stuff, so green and disruptive. So they put certain money in there, which is only accessible to the universities. And I think this is also a good way to actually guide this. But the universities will only be successful in there if they get support from the industry. Industry says, okay, I may need that in 20 years. I'm not needing it in 5 years, but at least they need the support from the industry that this might be relevant. So this is one way of how this can be connected. And another thing regarding the workforce, I'm coming from the town of Freiburg, where there is a total of 5 Fraunhofer institutes all working on different things. But what we have in common is that Freiburg is a green city. And 8 years ago, we founded a new university institute on sustainable systems engineering and started first the master class on sustainable systems engineering, and 3 years ago also bachelor's. And I think by educating young people who are really interested in these particular topics of sustainability is quite an important aspect in actually getting the workforce. But what we see there as well is that many of the students that are coming to join us, in particular for the masters, they're not coming from Europe. They're coming from India, they're coming from Africa, where they see the need. And when they say, oh, I'll go back to my home country, then I can do something with what I learned in Europe. And I think this is also quite important if we think that we have to bring all things together globally.
Thanks very much. So we'll come back to whoever had the next question. I think, yeah. Okay. Okay. The man in black.
Yes, thank you. Andreas Krabbe from the Danish EU office. So just to maybe do a slightly provocative question, what if people just flew less? And what if we encourage or incentivize this somehow? Maybe a higher CO2 tax when you purchase a ticket or something? Or maybe government leaders, EU chiefs, put up an example and stop flying private jets? We have climate meetings every year, where we see so many private jets going back and forth with government leaders, EU chiefs and whatnot. Does that set the right example for the regular Joe out there? Thank you.
We love provocative questions. So who'd like to take that first?
Shall I throw myself in?
Damien.
I mean, I think the industry's done some bad positioning in the past, because paying a carbon price for your emissions is what the rest of the economy's been doing since 2005. It's not punitive, and it adds a few euros to the cost of a flight within Europe. The industry's surviving, the low-cost carriers are thriving. We had some ridiculous posturing by IATA and the industry 10 years ago, and I hope to God that we're past that kind of stuff. To get further, I think, I mean, the Commission proposed as an important part of the Green Deal kerosene taxation. It wasn't a perfect proposal. It doesn't include cargo flights within Europe, for example, but it was a proposal to move away from this complete myth that the Chicago Convention bans fuel taxation. It doesn't. I wish I would stop hearing that. That part of the Green Deal hasn't been adopted, and that means obviously SAFs are going to cost more compared to kerosene without that element. And the legal barrier to taxing aviation fuel, like for other sectors, I mean, it's not meant in a punitive way. It's kind of how society works, that all sectors should contribute. The biggest barrier is the air service agreements. We had progress, Michel Barnier, with the UK, that both sides are now allowed to tax aviation fuel. It would be wonderful, say, if the Dubai Climate Conference and others would take up these issues and make progress. Because when you saw the African leaders the other week saying we should have a contribution to climate funding from aviation, you've actually got ICAO resolutions that say nobody should tax fossil fuel from aviation. And I mean, that might have been okay when we had the 1939 London Convention that never came into force. But we've got 27 years to get to net zero economy-wide. And I agree with you. I mean, there should be progress here. But I wouldn't, if industry supports that progress, I wouldn't go into flight shaming. I mean, I personally wouldn't fly when some of our leaders choose to fly, but they shouldn't necessarily be condemned for this, because they're in charge of really important machinery, and that machinery should basically internalize the external costs.
Thanks very much. Any other follow-ups?
Well, I'm a liberal by heart, so I'm coming out. So I can't agree with anything you said. Taxation is an instrument. It should be fair. It should not be punitive. And everyone is in a civil society should contribute. And that's this industry should contribute as well in a fair way. But in the end is creating the interest for the economy, for the companies, for the people with a good intellect to make improvement that will solve the problem. I can't, you guys are probably smarter than I, help me, but I can't recall of a big taxation scheme that has ever solved any big problem of humanity. Ingenuity did. And ingenuity is what should be, in my view, as a liberal, should be incentivized.
Thanks. So actually, before we come back, I think one or maybe two last questions from the floor. I wanted to bring us back to technology. So ingenuity is a good segue. So we've heard about sustainable aviation fuels. We've heard about hydrogen, fuel cell, hybrid electric. We've got 28 years till 2050. What are the technologies that we're going to see first in your crystal ball, and which will be further towards 2050? Maybe it's mostly a question for Riccardo and Michael.
Well, I can start with that. Well, I think We're going to see all of these technologies, and I think we need all of these technologies because each of these technologies has their sweet spot where they will operate at the maximum efficiency. So if we're looking into long-haul flight, in the next couple of years, we're not going to see that to be electric, and we're also not going to see that on pure hydrogen. However, if we're looking at short and medium range, we can go for hydrogen, and if we're looking into short range, I don't know, Brussels to Amsterdam, we can go electric. What I see as one of the challenges for hydrogen, for example, is to actually have, well, we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem here. So if we put these aircraft into service into 2035, how Airbus is telling it, so we have a design freeze in 2028. So in 2028, you need to have customers who want to buy these aircraft. And the customers will not buy these aircraft if they do not have infrastructure at the airports where they can refuel and do whatever the operations they need to do. However, no airport is going to tap in and build this hydrogen infrastructure if they're not sure that these aircraft are actually going to fly. So here, I think looking into Rosalinde's direction, we need some incentives from the European Union to actually solve this problem and put an egg there so that we can have a chicken later.
Would you like to add something, or let Rosalinde respond?
I can just say that I agree. I see it with everything you said. Probably the only angle I would add is that I see it a little bit more staged. So all these technologies will contribute, but in a more staged approach. I think novel architecture like the open fan will come first. Some hybridization of the engines will come along. Electric flight will probably help very short hauls. I see SAF. The SAF together with when we design an engine that will burn 20% less fuel, we're creating immediately a 20% less demand for SAF. So the two things will convert. Hydrogen will take a little bit longer in our view to mature. Now, it's if you think about the suite of technologies that you need to mature, from how you produce it in a sustainable way, how you transport it, how you store it. The design of the aircraft you were mentioning, needs to be completely different because the volume of the you need. So all of that will probably take a little bit longer. But all these key technology will contribute. Not to mention fuel cells. Fuel cells, we didn't talk about fuel cells. Fuel cells could have a very important play. We see much more activity here in Europe than in the US. US, we typically see them not reluctant, but they don't consider it very promising. Matter of fact, one other conversation I'm going to have with the board in 2 weeks from now is we should, in my view, put a little bit more effort in fuel cells, because together with hydrogen could be really the future.
Fantastic, thanks. Would you like to add?
Yeah, maybe if I can add, I couldn't agree more with Michael. It's also what I said in the beginning. We need to make sure that the ecosystem around the technological developments will be ready on time as well. And this is where we need political commitment from all the EU member states. So we need to be all aligned that this is what we want to deliver for Europe. And then we need to use all the instruments that we have available. I mean, we have legislation, for instance, when it comes to infrastructure, we have autonomous alternative fuel infrastructure regulation, for instance, for the road transport. But also you mentioned the possibilities of recycling. I mean, we have legislation in place to recycle electrical and electronic equipment, which are relatively small still. We have legislation in European level to recycle cars. We do not have legislation at the moment in place at the European Union to recycle aircraft, for example. But I do think that there are solutions both from the regulatory side that can support and also from the investment side. And that's why I think the work that is currently being carried out by the Alliance on Zero Emission Aviation, the ASEA, the whole purpose of this alliance is really to make sure that we will have the whole regulatory framework, the whole ecosystem, the investment framework in place on time. And of course, 2028 sounds really very, very fast. But I do think in order to be really successful, we need the political commitment, not only from the European Commission, but also from the EU member states to collectively deliver and to collaborate.
Thank you very much. I think we've got maybe time for one, possibly two last questions from the audience. Anybody have a last question? One over here. Erica will bring you the microphone.
Hi, Sylvester Pinho from Imperial College. One thing that has not been mentioned yet today is things like direct air capture. Do you see it as having a role in net zero aviation, particularly since with, for instance, SAF, we are never going to get exactly to zero emissions? Thank you.
Damien, eager to answer that one.
No, I mean, this innovation fund I spoke about is primarily not to do with aviation. If you read about the projects in Iceland, the Carbfix, Silverstone and other projects, they're all being paid for from the emissions trading system. But also the reason why they're being done is because of the carbon price. The carbon price benefit to them from storing is basically 5 times the amount of innovation fund money they're getting. And I don't see aircraft very soon storing their own carbon. I look to the engineers, but as part of an economy-wide effort. I mean, IATA, like 20 years ago, said it's a no-brainer, or it was Arthur Anderson for them, wrote it's a no-brainer to pay other sectors of the economy to reduce and also to remove carbon. I mean, that was right then, it's right now. It's crazy that we've had airline associations lobbying against sensible approaches. Life carries on, and I mean, in Europe, particularly in Iceland, we have removals happening, starting to happen at scale. But I mean, the airlines are very indirectly involved in this because it's happening with ground-based installations. And I guess that if I'd emphasize one point, it's how much the rest of the economy is moving. The chemicals industry, the steel industry, the power industry. I mean, they're all on board with this net zero by 2050. And I think the gaping gap at the moment is long-haul flights, where there's zero incentive to move to hydrogen. There's zero incentive to move to hybrid engines because this ICAO scheme requires China and the US to implement it, and it has a zero carbon price. And that's a worry because within Europe, we are moving. This innovation fund is particularly to support electrification as well, say from Barcelona to Palma de Mallorca. This would be a great route to electrify. We could offer innovation prizes for this. So things are happening in Europe. I'd echo Rosalinde, I don't think they get enough reporting on because it seems that Bill Gates does something, it's reported everywhere. But there's huge amounts happening in Europe. But yeah, the carbon removals aren't so much to do with the airlines or manufacturers, but they absolutely are happening in Europe.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to add to that, or we sneak in one last question? Do we have one last question? If not, I've got one, just a quick one, and it probably gives it, what, maybe a short answer, maybe not. How soon do you think that we can realistically talk about carbon neutral aviation? Maybe a question for the engineers.
There is a firm commitment. There is 2050. So I think we shouldn't.
You don't want to be the last at the gate, no?
I'll be happy to be the last in 2050, the first in 2050. We see 2050 is a challenge, and we are all devoted to achieve that goal. I don't think we are at the point where we can realistically think that the goal can be pulled in time.
Okay. Michael? Oh, I fully agree with Riccardo. I mean, you have to see that there is many thousands of aircraft flying around, and you have to get rid of them first and introduce the new ones. So what you also have to do is actually ramp up production rates and the efficiency in the production at a low cost, because obviously airliners and also OEMs, they want to make some profit on the aircraft. They just don't only want to be green, they also want to make some profit. So it will take time, but we'll be there.
Maybe if I could add, I mean, we've set ourselves in the context of the Clean Aviation Partnership, the objective of entry into service of the net zero aircraft by 2035. As Michael mentioned, that gives us a really short deadline. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that, the European industry is just, taking it easy and saying, oh, 2050. I do think that there is a big ambition, also short term, 2035, and I think that would be, the next milestone that we should be all keeping our eyes on. But then, of course, the challenges are for scaling up and deploying solutions. But I'm very confident that from a technological perspective, at least for the short and medium range, we will be delivering relatively soon.
Great. Thank you very much. Damien.
I hate to end on a note of pessimism. I mean, I think our societies can do this. But Antonio Guterres had some great comments about sort of having future targets without plans and policies to back them up. And I think we'll see in the coming years whether people are serious about this. I mean, it's so easy to say, I'm going to go on a diet in 25 years' time. And if everyone says, great, I'll see you in 23 years, I mean, that's precisely the wrong way to go. So it can be done, but at the level of sort of the laws and the economics, I think industry has to be helped to make profits on the way to doing this and work constructively.
Let me just say exactly on this point. We need to be aggressive in our targets, but also realistic. We are flying people, and it's not like doing anything else, right? In normal situation, it takes almost 10 years to develop a regular new aircraft with a regular new engine. I'm not talking about big disruptions. Here we're talking about an aircraft potentially completely new in design and propulsion system that we've never seen before. So planning and without rushing it, good planning is what is gonna win us the big prize. Delivering improvements consciously along the way, from electrical short haul all the way to transatlantic hydrogen.
Thank you very much. So I think that was probably a good last word to end on, because we're out of time. Thanks for all the passion on the podium here. Thanks for all the great questions, and to the people who followed us online. So I believe we have a coffee break. And I also want to thank GE for sponsoring this discussion. I forgot to say that at the beginning, so please thank you for sponsoring the discussion. Thanks.